Okay, next question.
I'm Ahmed Yusuf. I'm studying politics. I'm a journalist, and I work for a website. We covered some stories about Donald Trump because he's so funny.
Yes, me too.
He talked about the size of his penis, so we covered his story. Can we classify the American media based on political parties? In Kurdistan, we have a specific division between the media. We know this TV belongs to this party, political parties. Do we have the same or kind of this story in the United States? How is another question, how is the economic relation between politicians and the American media, not only during the election, before and after the election?
Okay.
What is the main source of income of the American media?
Okay. All right. So again, take what I say with a grain of salt, in knowing that I am coming from a left perspective. I mean, I don't identify myself as someone who promotes, or I should say, or is partisan per se. I view the Democratic Party as the best option of the two main options that we have in our system of government, and but I see them as also very problematic. So, and I think that that's something to understand. There is, I think even Fox News, which is a cable outlet, which is largely, I mean, most people, and I feel comfortable in saying this, would perceive that as a conservative news outlet. There are some people I run into who think it's just they are the only ones who are fair. But I think most people in the country would perceive it as a conservative news outlet. For a long time, and I think they have tried to distance themselves, and I think they've gotten themselves caught up, particularly in this election, I also perceive them as basically being a mouthpiece for the Republican Party. They've run into problems with that because they were trying to play two games at once, and Donald Trump has sort of created a fissure there. I don't believe, and I believe that MSNBC, which is largely perceived from I would say from 2005 or 6 to fairly recently, was perceived of as left-leaning. And I think for a period of time, I would say was also very protective of the president, and not necessarily Democratic partisan, but protective of the president. Now they have made a sort of announced decision to be less ideological. I think there are parts of their programming that are more left, that still remain left-leaning, and therefore you could argue pro-democratic in terms of the parties. The rest of the media, except for smaller outlets like mine, but the rest of the broadcast media, radio tends to have a lot of right-wing talk. But the rest of the TV media ostensibly is not affiliated with party. And I think that's largely true. I think they tend to support money. And the moneyed interests are in both parties and tend to be labeled as centrists. And I think you'll find that centrists, oddly, in this country, hold positions that are contrary to the vast majority of Americans when it comes to sort of financial issues. So just as an example, Social Security is the one of the country's most broadly used and revered programs. It provides for insurance, retirement insurance, disability insurance, and orphans and widows. And 80% of the country supports maintaining these payments or growing them. But there is a consistent centrist position that we should cut them. That's just one example. And I think most media outlets tend to be in that area because they perceive it's money that dominates. In terms of your second question, which was the relationship between politicians and media in terms of
the economic relation.
Well, like I say, during the political season, you get billions of dollars in political advertising. During the non-electoral season, which is almost never, frankly, I mean, for a presidential election, it starts 2 years out. And then you have congressional races and senatorial races. But I would also add that legislatively, you get outside groups and who spend hundreds of millions of dollars every year, hundreds of millions of dollars every year to influence government policy. So things like fossil fuel energy, things like social issues, things like cutting Social Security, gun policy, which is a big issue in this country. This money is spent constantly on advertising that goes to the media. And we have media consolidation in this country because of that Telecommunications Act I mentioned earlier. And so, you have large corporations. NBC and MSNBC used to be owned by one of our biggest, 51%, used to be owned by one of our biggest, if not the biggest, arms manufacturer in the country, perhaps in the world. Now they own a minority share, but that station is now owned by one of the biggest cable companies in the country that control the pipes for internet. And so there's a lot of conflict of interest here. If you wanted to get good examination of a policy surrounding our most important utility, or what is becoming our most important utility after things like water and electricity, is the internet, right? And the other issue is should we be spending this much money on military? Do we have a clear sense of what countries and what entities represent a danger or a threat to U.S. security? Are we sure we understand that because we have someone who has a vested interest in us feeling like we are being threatened in some way? So.
Okay, so any more questions?
Yes. Thank you very much. My name is Anwar. I'm international studies student here. I'm from Baghdad. Yesterday I asked a group of my friends about like they share the same worldviews with me. So they are familiar with your work and your like worldviews or left-wing views. So I asked them like, what should I ask him? To be clear, confirm my question, we are a group of right wingers. We are ex-Muslims. We are live here in Muslim societies, but we all are Trump fans, and not just my friends. I'm talking about a large number of ex-Muslims who live in Middle East, and guess what? They're Republicans, and they support Donald Trump. So they told me to ask you about Islamic terrorism. One of the most important issues in the American elections. How would you pursue me or pursue the group of my friends I told you about that? Islamic terrorism is not really a threat to the United States or to the world when we are ex-Muslims. We grew up in Muslim societies. If you talk with the Americans, that's gonna be different when you talk with me or you talk with my friends. So how would you pursue that? Republicans say Islamic terrorism is a real threat, but on the left, the Democrats, they don't even use the name. They don't say it's Islamic terrorism because political correctness. So how would you pursue me? That's not a threat.
So if I understand what you said is how would I refute the idea that those of us on the left don't take Islamic terrorism as seriously as we should? Is that it?
Yeah, and how would you pursue ex-Muslims who live in the Middle East, live in Muslim countries, and they support Donald Trump because of his harsher on Islamic terrorism than the Democrats?
Well, the first thing I would say about supporting Donald Trump as an ex-Muslim, that makes a lot more sense than it does if you're a Muslim. Because I can tell you that my daughter has a friend in school. She's 10. She has a friend in school, and we live in an extremely, we live in New York City. It's a extremely diverse city. And she comes to school and she's worried that her family and her are going to have to leave school because of the rhetoric that Donald Trump uses. So it makes more sense to me that an ex-Muslim would be supportive of Donald Trump than a practicing Muslim or self-identifying Muslim. I can tell you this, that look, the question for me is, what is in the, how does one respond to any given threat in a proportionate way? And what is it that you are protecting? ISIS, let's say, for instance, or Al-Qaeda has limited capacity, in my estimation, to threaten this country in a broadly speaking. I do not believe that either one represents an existential threat to this country. I think the thing that we're attempting to protect is, in America, is really, the primary thing is I don't think that there's a threat to our land. I think there is a rather small threat to our lives. Frankly, 50,000 people a year die in car accidents in this country. I don't believe that ISIS or Al-Qaeda has the ability to kill 50,000 Americans annually. We have, people still speed and go faster than they should and drive, and, we don't drive in completely up-armored vehicles here that would theoretically cut down on car accidents or their lethality. We respond to threats with a commensurate amount of of caution, except when it comes to the idea of Islamic terrorism. I'm not sure if those are the words that the left is not supposed to say, or that the right wants us to say in this country. But I do think that we have to acknowledge that there are 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, and that a incredibly small fraction of a fraction of those are radicalized in a way that want to commit international terrorism, and that represent a direct threat to us. And so the amount of rhetoric, the amount of dollars, and frankly, the amount of lives. I mean, I know from the perspective of people living in Kurdistan, the things have probably gotten better in the past 15 years. Or
I'm from Baghdad originally, but I study here.
Okay, and you can tell me from your perspective, as terms of broadly speaking in Iraq, if things have gotten, I mean, I would imagine things have gotten better than when America invaded. I don't know. I'm curious as to your perspective, but from my perspective, my tax dollars ended up killing, by our own Defense Department's numbers, and I imagine they don't, they're fairly conservative numbers, close to a couple of 100,000 people. And I'm still not clear why we did that. In terms of, at the very least, in terms of our national security. I don't think that we are, that from our national security, it's any better or worse per se. I think that certainly the way that and I don't know if there was a way for us to have invaded and occupied Iraq for as long as we did, that would not have led to the growth of ISIS. If there was a way, I've not really been made aware of it. And if there was a way, we certainly didn't do it. And so, from my perspective, the rhetoric on the right has multiple problems. One, it gives us a warped perspective on what that threat is and ultimately how we should respond to it. Two, it alienates a large, or at least a significant, or just any portion of our population in a way that I think is fundamentally un-American in terms of these values that we are purporting to protect. The practical implications of that, too, are that to the extent that you have a problem in, let's say, Europe, where police forces cannot track down people who commit terrorist attacks, it's because those societies have not done enough to integrate their Muslim populations. And so it's easier for terrorists to hide out in those communities or to submerge themselves. So from a practical standpoint, I don't think that makes sense either. And I think it just warps our foreign policy and our domestic policy. I mean, it causes a huge amount of waste, frankly, and money that could be spent on other things. So that would be my response to your friends.
Okay, so why don't we, does anyone have any final questions? Or we can flip it around, Sam, and you can perhaps ask students some questions? Does that work for you?
That would be great.
Okay, so now you guys are under the microscope. So go ahead.
So, I mean, I plan to provide this audio to my podcast and perhaps, post this on YouTube. Could I get, would you guys mind, everyone in the room, just, you don't have to give your name if you don't feel comfortable, but just give us a sense of where you're from in Iraq and what your ethnicity, how you identify. Is that okay? Are people comfortable with that?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so we can start with Ahmed Yusuf and go around in a thing. Fritz and Sarah, you can be included as well. So go ahead.
I'm Ahmed Yusuf. I'm studying politics. I'm from Iran, but I am Kurd. So I'm from Iranian Kurdistan. And that's it.
My name is Botan. I'm from Sulaimani, which obviously Kurdistan, Iraqi Kurdistan.
My name is Hajir Ibrahim. I'm from Suli, but I live in the Howler because of the political conflict and something like that.
Howler is Erbil, which is the capital of the Kurdish region.
My name is Anwar. I'm from Baghdad, and I'm Arab in ethnicity and ex-Muslim.
I'm Lara, and I'm from Erbil, and yeah.
I'm Fritz Mansma. I teach in the social sciences department. I'm from the States.
He's from New York, right?
I'm from New York.
New York.
And I'm Sara Bajalan. I'm half Iranian, half American, and I've lived in both countries. I'm the communications director here.
My name is Gershel, and I am from this Iraqi part of Kurdistan.
Yeah. Which city?
Khalazza.
Khalazza?
Yeah, it's like 2 hours away.
I know what Khalazza is.
So ethnicity is Kurdish?
Yeah.
Kurdish.
Yeah.
I'm Lana Jabbar. I'm half Arab, half Kurd from Iraq. My dad's from Samara, my mom's from Sulaimani.
My name is Linda Karim. I live in Suli and I'm Kurdish.
I'm Kashan Muhammad. I'm from Kurdistan region, and of course I'm Kurdish.
Okay, and I'm Djene Bajalan. I'm half Kurdish, half Welsh. From the north of England, lived here and around in various places. So, is that good? That's everybody?
Okay. And so I'm curious as to, I mean, just the perspective that you all had. I mean, as far as I can tell, you would have been fairly young when the American invasion took place. But I'm curious on the range of perspectives on America's invasion and occupation, and let me just I'll stop there. I've got more.
Okay, so who wants to give that perspective?
Yeah.
One of the ladies? Okay, what time?
Yeah, it's my turn, obviously.
It's Botan's turn, yeah.
I don't know why you keep calling it invasion or occupation. According to us, that was liberation. I mean, at least according to Kurdistan. That was not invasion. We know that the United States had an interest here. You mentioned something about national security, but I would argue that it had nothing to do with the national security of the United States. Rather, it had something to do with the energy security of the United States. But it doesn't matter for us because we got rid of a very brutal dictator in Iraq, and that was really great for us. At least we could live 10 years in a high standard life here.
Anybody else? You're from Baghdad, so maybe it's a little bit different from your perspective.
Yeah. Actually, I was very young, like I was 12 years old when the war started, but I still remember that the majority of people also, as here in Kurdistan, they welcomed what happened in 2000, regardless of the name. But years later, when the civil war started, like especially in the years like 2006 and 2007, the same people who welcomed this invasion or liberation or whatever, they regretted that civil war is it's dictatorship is way better than civil war. At least, like, I'm not saying, like, I'm not defending Saddam. He's horrible, but like having a dictator in power is still better than like finding bodies. Like one day, like I was in high school, I went out. There were some bodies on the streets. Like I think Saddam rule was like relatively better than this kind of. So this is not like, I'm not talking about everybody. This is at least my perspective on like large number of people perspective. Of course, some people have other opinions.
Yeah, the case was like that in Baghdad. He prefers a dictator rather than seeing bodies on the streets because of a civil war. But during the time of Saddam Hussein, you could have found hundreds of bodies on the streets.
Yeah,
in Kurdistan. I mean, the situation in Baghdad was better than the situation in Kurdistan. That's why we are right now really comfortable. If we have a civil war, we prefer that rather than having another Saddam Hussein.
No, I agree. I totally agree. You know what you said? It was better. Was it better? Like the same amount of people were dying in the south or in Baghdad, but at least in secret. Like in general, like whatever you can say, whatever you say, but still, civil dictatorship is better than civil war.
Okay. Did you want to say something, Linda? No.
Well, I wasn't here when it happened.
Where were you?
I live in the UAE.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're in the north, so you were nice to say.
Maybe I can say something. I was in Iran, in Iranian Kurdistan. Actually, we were angry because he said that why Iran should not be the first option to attack. But after the result and the civil war and what happened to Iraq, we are happy now.
Okay. Anybody else want to make a comment? Go ahead.
I think that we have a sectarian issue in the Iraq between the majority of the Shia and the majority, we can say the majority of the Sunni. For the Shias, it wasn't an invasion, it was a liberation for them. And for Kurds, absolutely it was a liberation. And we saw the United States as a hero at this time because United States destroyed one of the brutal dictator in the Middle East. And we see that as not Iraqi invasion, Iraqi liberation.
What about, do you feel the same way? No? Liberation.
Yeah, of course. For Kurds, just like they said, I agree with them, both of them, Najib and Botan. Like, we super happy with that because as Kurds, we saw a lot of stuff like that Saddam did with us. So we want to, like, as they said, live with civil war is better than living under a dictatorship. Like just.
Can you ask a stupid question? What's his opinion about the Kurdistan independent?
Yeah.
It's a stupid question.
They all wanted to ask you, what's your opinion on Kurdistan's independence?
Oh, that's a stupid question.
I don't, to be honest with you, I don't have a strong feelings about it, to be honest. I mean, I think in the main, I don't, I probably, tend to be supportive of the autonomy. I mean, it's clearly things have worked out well for folks in Kurdistan. And so it's not something that I, to be honest with you, focus on that much. I mean, I know obviously there's problems with Turkey, and but I don't. It's to be honest, it's a fairly remote question for me. I mean, I have no desire to basically impose my perspective on on what happens with Iraq, other than what would potentially bring about the most peaceful situation. But I'm curious as to if you all, and I know one of you is from Baghdad, if you all have relations or friends who are living in outside of Kurdistan, whose perspectives are similar to the guy from Baghdad, where things haven't worked out quite as well, I guess. And I would add to that, is there a sense that the civil war was inevitable, particularly between the Shia and the Sunni?
And the civil war was between them. It was not. I mean, the Kurds were not involved in that civil war.
Right.
That was only between the Sunnis and the Shias. And to answer your question, I mean, in Kurdistan, when people get angry of the government, they sometimes say that the life during the reign of Saddam Hussein was better. But I mean, it doesn't come out from their hearts. It doesn't come out from their feelings, their thinkings. That's just a feeling towards the bad situation that's happening right now in Iraq and Kurdistan.
But I think the question was primarily, do you have relatives and family who live outside of Kurdistan and have a different perspective on a perspective more like Anwar's perspective?
Yeah, I was trying to say that they have the same perspective as us. I mean, my relatives. They have the same perspective as me. They were really happy for the liberation of Iraq, but the same again. When they get angry, they say that Saddam was better.
Yeah, can I ask now? He said people here don't say it from their hearts. People here also, they don't say it from hearts. Again, I'm not defending Saddam. I'm not saying he's good, but people like that in 1990s there were economic sanctions. Like people were in poverty, like very very bad type of poverty. People still remember that. But what I'm saying that it's like when you have to choose between two horrible things, you choose the one with the least horrible. I mean, and also it's been like 13 years, 14 years, and it's like it's going nowhere. It's, nothing like going to happen. So it's like people reach a point when it's pointless. It's pointless where we are going.
Any other comments? What was the second part of your question again, Sam?
Well, it was basically that question as to whether or not you think that your perspective is shared by people living in other parts of Iraq.
Like outside of Kurdistan?
Yes.
Outside of Kurdistan, do you think people have different opinions about the...
I have no idea, but I would say that many Sunnis, not the majority of them, but many Sunnis were supporting Saddam Hussein. Basically because Saddam Hussein was a Sunni and he was supporting them. He had many patron-client networks here. But if you choose people from the Shia community and the Kurds, I think you can barely find people who see the Iraqi invasion as an invasion, not a liberation.
And I guess the other question was, did you think that there was inevitable that it would be a civil war?
Yeah. Do you think the civil war was amongst the Sunni and Shia?
Can I answer again?
Yeah.
Yes, I think so. Because Iraq is not a country. Iraq is basically three parts. We have the southern part, we have the middle part, and the northern part. These parts are linked together, and when there's a gap for disintegration, they just disintegrate. So Iraq was not a country. They just linked some lands together. They created a country, and you can see that the result would be like this. Under the reign of Saddam Hussein, no one could do that. But when there's an opportunity, of course, the Shia part of Iraq wants a kind of freedom, a kind of liberty, and the Kurds want the same. So I mean, during that time, the middle and the southern part of Iraq were not strong, so they couldn't fight with the Kurds. For that reason, they fought with each other. But if they had the strength to do so, I think there would have been a brutal civil war between the Kurds, the Sunnis, and the Shiites in Iraq.
And I think the civil war was inevitable because Iran has had a huge impact in Iraq, and also Iraq is not a centralized government. And I think that the Joe Biden solution for the Iraq is a final solution, that Iraq should be separated into three parts, one of them for Kurds, one of them for Shia, and one of them for Sunni, because we don't have any coexistence between these different perspectives anymore in the Iraq.
What do you guys think? Does anybody else have a comment on that? Do you think the civil war was inevitable?
I think, yeah, it was when you remove a dictator and you give people some like extra freedom, especially if you are familiar with the modern history of Iraq. Actually, the war between Sunni and Shia never stopped since like when the Islam split into two parts. But I mean, still, when there is a dictator, we have a different story. But when you remove the dictator and give people do whatever they want, you expect this kind of civil war to happen.
Any of you ladies have a perspective on this?
We agree.
Huh?
We agree. I think it was extremely hard under having a dictator in order to have some sort of freedom or separation. But once that was gone, I think it was inevitable.
So you all seem to think it was inevitable.
Hi, I'm Sam Seder, and this is an Ann Coulter doll.
You should not be immigrating here. Stay in your country and hate us.
For smart progressive talk and a little bit of this and even a little bit of that.
Mission accomplished.
Subscribe to our podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and like us on Facebook to get some of our best video clips.